Open your mind. The monks used to say that the mind is like a door without a lock. No key is needed to open it, only the courage to push. And yet, most people spend their entire lives staring at that door, convinced it is closed. High on a hill surrounded by ancient cedar trees stood a temple known not for its size or wealth, but for the invisible. Travelers didn't come there seeking answers, but to unlearn the questions. It was a place of deep silence, where even the wind seemed to whisper ancient wisdom. To this temple came a young man named Aritamo. He was not a typical seeker. He wasn't searching for enlightenment, fame, or escape. He had come because of a single phrase that had unsettled him to the bone. A closed mind sees no bars, but still lives in prison. That idea had stolen his sleep. Aritamo had always been curious, a voracious reader, a lover of logic, science, systems. He could explain how things worked, the flight of a bird, the cycle of water, the electric signals of the human brain. But he couldn't explain why, despite all that knowledge, he felt an emptiness, a subtle lack of freedom, as if the world he understood so well was nothing more than an invisible cage. When he arrived at the temple, he was greeted by an old man who didn't share his name. He didn't ask where Aritamo came from or what he was seeking. He simply looked at him with eyes that seemed to have witnessed centuries, and offered him a cup of tea. "What do you wish to know?" the elder asked, with no solemnity, no expectation. Aritamo didn't know how to respond. His mind was filled with questions, but each one felt absurd in that setting. Finally, he said, "I want to open my mind, to feel something more real than my thoughts, something I can't read in a book." The elder nodded. He didn't seem surprised. He simply rose and led him to a small wooden pavilion, open to a pond filled with koi. That was where his training began, but not with meditation techniques, nor with koans, not even with postures. His first task was to observe. Nothing more. To observe the water, the bamboo, the insects dancing on the leaves. Day after day, hour after hour, the other monks walked past him without a word. Sometimes they greeted him with a gentle bow, as if recognizing in his search a newly lit flame. A week passed, then another. Aritamo didn't know if he was learning anything, but he could feel something inside him begin to shift. His mind, once so quick to label, analyze, and compare, began to surrender. He no longer tried to understand the sound of the water. He simply listened, and at times he felt as though he was part of that sound. One morning, the elder returned. "What have you discovered?" Aritamo hesitated. Finally, he said, "I don't know how to open my mind, but I know when it's closed, and that's already a beginning." The elder smiled, and for the first time he shared his name. "They call me Sean. It means passing cloud. I am nothing, but I can show you how to see without filters, how to feel without the burden of what's been learned." And so began the real journey, a journey without maps, without destination, just steps into what had always been there, waiting to be seen, with new eyes. The days slipped by like incense smoke. Nothing seemed to change, and yet everything was in motion. Aritamo swept dry leaves, carried water from the spring, cooked rice with the other monks, and at times simply observed. Life at the temple wasn't designed to entertain. It was designed to reveal. One morning, as he washed wooden bowls by the river, he overheard a village boy ask Master Sean, "How can I open my mind if I don't even know when it's closed?" Sean didn't answer right away. He picked up a dry leaf from the ground, blew on it gently, and let the wind carry it away. "A closed mind," he said at last, "is like that leaf when it believes it is the tree. It doesn't realize it belongs to the wind." Aritamo froze. The words struck him like a bell. He thought of all the times he had defined himself, I'm logical, I'm rational, I'm a skeptic. What if all those were just dead leaves he was clinging to? What if opening the mind wasn't about adding more ideas, but about letting the old ones go? That night, under a star-studded sky, he walked through the forest near the temple. In the dimness, every sound was sharper. The creaking branches, the distant chirp of a cicada, the whisper of wind in the treetops. He wasn't thinking. He wasn't trying to make sense of anything. He was simply listening. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like a mirror. And in that mirror, he didn't see his face or his past. He saw something he didn't know how to name, but it felt more real than any idea. When he returned, he found the master waiting by the rock garden. Sean asked nothing. He simply pointed to the center of the garden, where a wide empty space was surrounded by small stones. "That is you," the elder said. "Not the stones, the space between them. But you won't see it as long as you keep calling yourself a stone." Aritamo understood. To open the mind wasn't to change ideas. It was to stop identifying with them. It was to be neither stone, nor leaf, nor wind, but to open to direct experience without filters, without names. And so he began to see the world as if for the very first time. A cup of tea was no longer just a cup of tea. It was warmth held between hands, steam rising like a wordless prayer, the sound of ceramic meeting wood, the pause between one sip and the next, life in its fullness without needing to be understood. Because, as Sean would say, as long as you try to understand, you're seeing from the outside. But when you simply are, there's no inside or outside. And Aritamo began to be, not with effort, not with technique, just present, like the river that flows, without needing to know where it's going. Sean, the weightless master, often walked barefoot across the stones of the dry garden, as if he wasn't stepping on the earth but on the spaces between it. Every step was an unwritten poem, every silence a teaching. One afternoon, Aritamo approached him with a furrowed brow. He was restless. He had tried to meditate for hours, but his mind felt like a wild horse. Thoughts of his family, his city, his old job. Everything came back stronger the more he tried to push them away. "Master," he said on the verge of frustration, "I think something's not working. The more I try to empty my mind, the more it fills up." Sean looked at him with the kind of tenderness one offers someone who's just taken their first step after years of sitting still. "Come with me," he said. They walked to the temple kitchen. There, the master took a teapot and 2 cups. He poured tea into Aritamo's cup. When it was full, he didn't stop. He kept pouring, letting the liquid overflow and soak the wooden table. "Master, it's spilling." Sean smiled. "So is your mind. You want to fill it with something new, but it's already full. There's no room for the present when everything is occupied by what you were, what you think you are, and what you fear to lose." Then he set the teapot aside and continued, "Opening your mind isn't about gaining more knowledge. It's about letting the unnecessary spill out, letting the old leave without resistance. Only then can the essential enter." Aritamo felt as if the master hadn't poured tea, but liquid truth, over his thoughts. That night, as cold wind blew down from the mountain, he sat by the pond. He didn't try to meditate. He didn't try to empty himself. He simply allowed himself to observe. And he watched how his mind tried to speak, justify, organize, plan, but for the first time he didn't fight it. He simply watched, like one watches a cloud or a leaf floating on the water, without clinging, without rejecting, and in between thoughts something new would arise, a space, a silence, a rest that came not from effort, but from surrender, the surrender of control, of judgment, of the need to understand. Sean would say, "Everything you chase runs away. but what you allow to come sits beside you. Eritamo began to understand that mental openness wasn't a conquest. It was a surrender. The mind opens like a flower, not by force, but by trust. Just as dawn cannot be rushed, inner clarity comes when we stop pushing against the dark. And in that space where there was no more effort, no more resistance, a new presence began to blossom, a mind like the sky, without ceiling, without walls, without owner. The 4th month at the temple arrived without Eritamo being able to measure it. Time there didn't pass in hours, but in seasons. There were no clocks, only sunrises. No schedules, only tasks that appeared and vanished like morning dew. One spring afternoon, as he swept the path leading to the forest, Eritamo felt something inside him begin to crack. It wasn't painful, but it was inevitable, like an inner shell slowly wearing down. That was when, for the first time, he dared to ask a question he had long avoided. Master, why do I still feel fear? Even though I no longer think so much, why is it still so hard to trust, to let go, to flow, even though I understand what it means to open the mind? Sean led him to the edge of the pond, where the koi swam with the carefree grace of beings who do not know the word tomorrow. He picked up a smooth stone and tossed it into the water. Ripples spread outward in perfect circles, distorting the sky's reflection for a few seconds. That stone, the master said, is your ego, the you that still wants to stay safe even here, the part that still wants to understand, control, achieve. That's why the water gets disturbed every time you think you should be different. Eritamo watched the ripples slowly fade. Then, what do I do with that ego? Nothing, Sean replied. It's already falling on its own. Don't push it, don't judge it. Just watch it. It's like the stone. At first, it seems to disturb everything, but soon, the water remembers its stillness. And then he added, an open mind doesn't fight what arises. It embraces it, and then lets it go. Eritamo began to live from that space, not as a goal but as a practice. When a judgmental thought appeared, he didn't fight it. He greeted it like one welcomes a guest who won't be staying long. When fear surfaced, he allowed it to be, without disguising it as bravery. He knew that whatever arises will also dissolve, if allowed to pass. One morning, as he gathered dry branches, he heard a young monk complaining about the task. Why do we have to do this every day if tomorrow there'll be more branches? Eritamo, with a calm voice, replied without thinking, because we don't do it to change the forest. We do it to change who we are when we care for it. And in that moment, he realized his mind was no longer the same. Not because he had learned a great truth, but because he had stopped searching for one. Like a pond that, once it stops being disturbed, reflects things as they are, without effort, without desire, just presence. Summer arrived at the temple without announcing itself. It was simply there, in the heat rising from the stones, in the hum of insects, in the slower rhythm of the days. Eritamo now slept less and smiled more, not because he had achieved something, but because he had stopped chasing. His body moved with a new lightness, and his gaze, once analytical and sharp, had softened, like sunlight filtering through the forest leaves. One day, while helping to repair the roof of one of the temple halls, he slipped and fell from a modest height. It wasn't a serious fall, but it was enough to keep him resting for several days. During that time of enforced stillness, something within him began to speak with an ancient voice. It wasn't his mind. It wasn't thought. It was as if life itself, in its most intimate form, had been whispering the same message all along. You don't need to understand. You just need to allow. And then he understood. There were still corners of his mind that remained closed. because he still believed he had to do something to open them. The ego, that illusion that one is the author of all things, was still operating quietly, subtly. On the third day, Sean came to visit him. He sat by Eritamo's side and handed him a bamboo stalk. "Do you know why bamboo never breaks in the wind?" Eritamo shook his head. "Because it doesn't resist. It bends. It sways. It doesn't struggle to be rigid. And that's why it endures." The master continued, "The mind that opens does not open through force, but through flexibility. Like bamboo, it doesn't need to assert itself. It only needs to trust." Eritamo ran his fingers over the stalk. He felt its lightness, its hollow core, its smoothness. He realized that bamboo is strong not because it hardens, but because it is empty inside. It holds on to nothing. Everything passes through it. And he thought, maybe an open mind isn't a mind filled with new ideas, but a mind as empty as bamboo, through which life can flow freely. As the days passed, his body healed. But something deeper had also been healed, the need to be in control. He no longer needed to understand the path. It was enough to walk it. He stopped searching for special moments. He realized the sacred is in the simple, a drop of water sliding down a leaf, a bird's song that expects no applause, the scent of freshly cooked rice at dawn. Sean often summed it up with a phrase he repeated whenever someone tried to attain enlightenment. "It's not about arriving. It's about removing what blocks you from seeing that you're already here." And so the sky was no longer above. It was everywhere. An open mind was no longer a destination. It was the natural way of being present, without fear of falling, without rushing to rise, without needing to be more than what one already is. The sound of breaking pottery shattered the temple's silence like a soft thunder. It was an old cup, with an uneven rim and an ashen hue. Eritamo had used it every morning since he arrived. He didn't drop it. It wasn't an accident. He let it fall. No anger, no fear, just release. He held it for a moment, and then, with a slow and steady movement, let it slip from his hand onto the stones of the garden. He wanted to see what would happen when one didn't cling, not even to what one had come to love. And when the shards touched the earth, something unexpected stirred in him. Relief, as if the cup had not merely been an object, but an extension of his identity, a symbol, a mirror of his routines, of the attachment to what made him feel safe in his spiritual journey. From a distance, Sean watched, without a word or gesture. Later, as they passed one another by the incense pavilion, he simply said, "Breaking a cup is easy. Breaking the image you have of yourself. That's the real challenge." Eritamo understood. He had been shaping a new version of himself, the spiritual man, the disciplined disciple, the deep seeker, but that too was a kind of prison, more subtle, more refined, but a prison nonetheless. He still wanted to be someone, even if that someone was enlightened. And he realized that to open the mind was at its deepest root, to stop identifying with any form, even the beautiful ones, even the sacred ones. Sean used to say, "The ego does not fear vanishing, fears being seen." And this is what Eritamo was beginning to see, his constant need for meaning, his urge to build a narrative, a reason, an explanation. And in doing so, unknowingly, he built himself a home with invisible bars. One evening, he sat before the fire in the common hall. The monks were chanting ancient verses, but he didn't join them. He just listened, and inside him, something began to dissolve. Effortlessly, it was like he had been clenching his fist for years, and finally he let go. In that moment, he didn't feel joy, nor sadness. He felt space, pure, unnamed space. And in that space, a wordless understanding arose. All I believed myself to be, I am not. All I feared to release was never mine. All I longed for is already here. To open the mind was not a spiritual achievement. It was a voluntary loss, a joyful surrender, a fearless fall, a return to the fertile emptiness that holds everything. The next morning, Sean greeted him with a deeper bow than usual. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Both knew that something had broken, and at last the light could enter. The days had grown longer, but Aritamo no longer counted them. Time slipped through his fingers like river water, with no need to be held. Everything he once tried to control, he now let flow. One afternoon, Sean asked him to join him on the high mountain path, the one only elder monks walked during rites of passage. They climbed in silence for nearly an hour. The air grew thinner, filled with the scent of pine and silence. The trees gradually parted, revealing a small clearing where a large stone stood. Carved into it was a single kanji, emptiness. Aritamo gazed at it, asking nothing. Sean sat on the stone and motioned for him to do the same. I didn't bring you here to teach you something, said the master. I brought you to see where you already are. Here? Aritamo asked. Sean shook his head. Not the mountain. Within you. Aritamo looked down. He felt something stir inside him. It wasn't anxiety or doubt. It was a kind of gentle sorrow, as if he had remembered something he'd forgotten for years. Master, why do we keep searching for answers? He asked. When what truly matters doesn't need explanation. Sean looked out toward the horizon. Then, as if speaking to no one in particular, he replied, because the mind believes the path lies outside. But truth cannot be reached, only remembered. And only one who has emptied themselves enough can truly hear it. Aritamo closed his eyes. He felt the breeze on his skin, the distant call of a bird, the steady rhythm of his own heart. And for a moment he disappeared. There was no identity, no thoughts, only presence, a vastness without edges or center. And within that immensity, there was no mind left to open, because there were no more doors, no more walls. Everything was sky, everything was passage, everything was here. Sean broke the silence with one of his enigmatic phrases. When you stop trying to reach the summit, you'll realize you've always been there. And it wasn't a sentence that asked to be understood, only to be rested in. They descended from the mountain at sunset. Aritamo felt as if the world had changed, though he knew it hadn't. What had changed was the way he saw it. The temple, the trees, the monks, the sounds, the incense smoke, all the same. But inside him, the landscape was new, vaster, lighter, as if his mind no longer had edges. And in that limitless space, everything could enter and leave without ever being trapped. It was autumn once again. The leaves fell without drama, without sorrow. They simply let go of the tree, as if they knew. There's no loss in releasing what has already been. Aritamo walked barefoot along the path, now covered in warm colors. He wasn't thinking. He wasn't asking. Each step was whole, each breath enough. He had stopped searching for something special. He no longer needed signs. He didn't wait for miracles, because he had discovered the true miracle was seeing without filters. The temple moved with its own quiet rhythm. Rice simmered, incense burned, birds sang, and in the heart of all this, he was no longer a visitor or disciple. He was part of it. Sean, moving with his usual quiet steps, found him one morning watching moss grow on a stone. He sat beside him. They didn't speak for a long time. Then the master said, "Do you see it?" "See what, master?" "Everything." Aritamo smiled. He didn't need to understand. He had seen it. He had seen that the mind doesn't open by force, nor through theory, nor by will. It opens when we stop holding on to what is unnecessary, when we're no longer afraid to be empty, because that emptiness is not lack, but sacred space, a space for wonder, for compassion, for the silence that holds everything. That night, while watching the moon reflected in the pond, Aratamo remembered his first day at the temple. He remembered his impatience, his hunger for answers, his restlessness to change, and he realized none of that had been a mistake. Even his closed mind had been part of the path, because no mind is closed forever, only doors we haven't yet touched with humility. And then he truly understood. There's no method to open the mind, only surrender. No map, only presence. No secret, just the now, untouched by who we think we are. Sean appeared one final time in the story. He handed him a dry leaf and said, "This too is a teacher. Listen." And Aratamo held it with reverence, knowing he didn't need to interpret it. Just see it, feel it, let it go with the wind. The next day, no one saw Sean. Some said he had left. Others said he had always been everywhere. But Aratamo didn't go looking. He didn't need to, because now he knew that when the mind opens, every teacher is present. In the crow's call, in the smell of rice, in the crunch of fallen leaves, in oneself, and in that open, ownerless space, he could finally rest, not as someone who had reached the summit, but as one who realized there was never a summit, no finish line, no distance, only the eternal present, no locks, no keys, no other door than the moment being lived.